only way to reach the top.
This trail was called the Snake, as resembling that animal in its narrowness and its windings. There is also nothing but destruction in case your feet slip, for on each side there is a deep chasm.
Because the snake was so narrow, a handful of Sicarii had for years been able to beat back every attack by Rome's legions. But then the Romans began to build a ramp that would enable them to reach the top of Masada. For 2 years, the Romans built their ramp. And for 2 years, the Sicarii waited. On the day before the ramp was completed, the leader of the Sicarii, Eleazar ben Yair, told his men they faced an awful choice. If they surrendered, the Romans would crucify them as an example to the would-be rebels throughout their empire. Or they could die fighting and leave their wives and children to rape and slavery. Then he proposed a third alternative. Josephus learned what took place from 2 women who managed to slip away from the fortress.
To avoid the miseries that were to follow from their enemies, they resolved on the necessity of doing their own execution. Miserable men indeed were they whose distress forced them to slay their own wives and children with their own hands. The husbands tenderly embraced their wives and took their children into their arms and gave the longest parting kisses to them with tears in their eyes. Yet at the same time, they did complete that which they had resolved on. Not able to bear the grief they were under for what they had done, and esteeming it an injury to those they had killed to live even the shortest piece of time after them, they then chose 10 men by lot to slay all the rest. And they offered their necks to the stroke of those who executed that melancholy office. And when these 10 men had without fear killed them all, they made the same rule for casting lots for themselves, that he whose lot it was should first kill the other 9, and after all should kill himself. Now, for the Romans, they expected that they should be fought in the morning. But when they made their assault upon the fortress, they saw no enemy, but a terrible solitude on every side.
It is here that tradition of self-imposed martyrdom reaches its most poignant expression. And that is the very eloquent, if heartrending, statement that when I can no longer choose whether or not to die, I can still choose how to die. And that's what inspired the martyrs at Masada to take their own lives rather than to submit to slavery and death under Rome.
In just a few years, most of the groups that had dominated Judea and Judaism for centuries had vanished. The Sicarii and their fellow rebels were all dead. The authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essenes, had also been butchered by the Romans. And with no temple, the priesthood had become meaningless. Just one group remained, the Pharisees. According to the Jewish Book of Law and